Mosh Moshi, it's Spazat. What is my name? Spazatic Studio. It's Spazatic Studio.
Studio.
Welcome, babies and Patreon spazzlings, to the AMA slash story time for my time in art college and the internships therein. So, this video is going to be pretty informal, which means I'm just going to ramble. Obviously, I'm going to hide the names of people, companies, and institutions for privacy. I'm not going to give specific dates. This isn't meant to be your objective sign to go or to not go to art school or join the design industry. You have to decide that for yourself. These are just my experiences. So without further ado, disclaimer over, let's get into it. So the timeline of me being in art school starts from the third grade. My parents put me into a very competitive fine arts elementary school, and then you could do elementary and high school. So I did my whole minor education there. There wasn't too much focus on visual arts, but there was a lot of focus on performing arts and every form of music. So on pretty much a professional level, you were expected to play like multiple instruments and sing opera, do chamber music, medieval style, like every style. You got a music theory education. We actually had a full pottery studio in the basement, like kiln and all. It was crazy. So I would say a little more than half our day was devoted to the arts curriculum. And then if you wanted to go more in depth in a specific discipline, you could pay for extracurricular things. There was actually a university across the street from us, and they would have graduates come and like help the kids further their education. Obviously that was like you had to pay for that, but my parents paid for it. My experience was super music focused, so it's not like super relevant, but all you really need to know is my mom was anal about me being a classical musician. And I only really had time to pursue like the visual arts when I made the time, which luckily was all the time. I was kind of a goof especially in high school. I was not really interested in doing school, and so I pretended to listen to lectures and would doodle. And when I was home, I would doodle, and during my instrument practicing time, I would doodle. So it was a lot of drawing. But later, in the equivalent, like we don't have middle school here, at least we don't call it that, but in the equivalent of middle school, there were some extra free programs that were like design and graphic design focused. So you could do illustration, graphic design. Photoshop was really relevant at the time. There were some internship and shadowing opportunities that just had to do with like Photoshop. I only took part in one, and I wasn't super into it because I had no Photoshop experience, and I think I was just too young to really like Photoshop. I don't know if this is a controversially a brave take. I find Photoshop hard. I don't find it particularly intuitive. I think because I struggled a lot with it when I was young, I was just like so turned off by it. And so, timeline wise, this would be like the late 90s to the very early like 2010s. So social media was just becoming viable in terms of artists promoting themselves. And the technology, like as something so simple as Photoshop, was starting to become thought of as like the future. It was really just emerging. There were a handful of graphic design focused jobs, which had existed since like the 80s, which were not terribly impressive. There was maybe, like where I live, I don't know if things have changed, I haven't checked in, but at the time, there were only like two post-secondary degrees available in illustration and design or in like digital design. And until I did actually double check, until 2016, there was only one. So the other one got introduced like way later. So I feel like I've seen the spectrum of like ye old illustration and design. Kids have it a lot easier now, obviously, right? Because the internet is like infested our lives, and so everything is everywhere in terms of information, but also in terms of like avenues through which to make a career. For the sake of argument, I'm going to abbreviate illustration and design by using I and D, and we'll use the term fine arts for freeform artistic education. Because as we enter, spaz, the college years, it's just going to make a lot more sense. this way. But we're not done with high school. So in high school, I did my first internship opportunity. I had done, like I said, really limited graphic design at school through the extracurriculars. And I had two specific people in my life who were leading very visual arts, like focused lives. They were the only two people I think I ever knew until I became an adult who were able to make a living in the arts. So the first one I actually spoke about in my first YouTube video. He was a family friend who owned a studio, and he had been working in I&D since the 80s. He had a lot of interesting stories actually about the digitization of art, and how like the degrees that people would get in the 80s and the 90s eventually became obsolete, and they just don't exist anymore because of the way that like technology, like the education around technology and website design became segmented later. I know for a fact that there are two relatives of mine that got like these types of degrees circa the like not the seven, it would have been like, no, not even the 70s is too early, in the 80s, that now still work in the design field, and they're like, yeah, our degrees don't exist. Like they became like completely obsolete. It's just not a degree you can get anymore. It's a really interesting concept, this like the extinction of certain art degrees. I would probably reserve it for like a deep dive history lesson video. Anyway, but all you need to know is that he had a home studio. And then I had the other relative who worked in marketing and advertising with ye old pre-Elon Twitter. God bless. I don't really feel bad with not censoring like Twitter, but the company that the relative worked for had its own name. And so I'm not going to say the name of that. We'll just call it Twitter number 2. It's defunct now, that company, because they were absorbed by Twitter. The whole goal was to like pitch their proprietary marketing idea so that the company would be sold. And that's a whole other career. There's people that just like acquire small businesses and sell them off, you know, to become profitable. But the long and the short of it is I got to work in marketing and I got to work at I&D at like a really young age, during a time where social media was only really beginning to take form into what we know it as today. I got to work with artists from a very well-known TV show whose name I cannot tell you. It was wild. It's the equivalent of saying like I worked on Friends in the 90s as a 15-year-old. Like it's insane to me in hindsight that I got to work on that show, but my role wasn't too crazy. I did extremely basic coding. I did some traditional drawn art that got translated into digital form. I did some basic design. I got to see like how the sausage is made in terms of work from home, like marketing positions. And again, like this is not in the years where a work from home job was openly accepted or considered viable, like at all. So at this point, we're somewhere in the vicinity of 2012. But based on old footage on a home video that I found recently, it's possible that this was as early as 2010. I can't figure it out. I was looking for like an old resume, or like a backup of like my old LinkedIn or something, and I cannot get the dates. But because of my age, it would have had to have been around there somewhere. Like I would have had to have been a pre-teen-ish, so I think that checks out. Like a younger teenager, not like 16, 17. Anyways, I went to a lot of in-person events. Those were really fun. I got to be the intern guest of honor, so they would show me to prospective clients and be like, it's so easy, our software, that a kid could do it. And then I had my art featured at the Emmys, which was really fun because the company got nominated for like a tech Emmy. Essentially their whole thing was, it was almost like not a character AI, but we would make these like dialogue trees on Twitter so you could like tweet at the characters of your favorite show, and then they would tweet back at you, and then you would kind of go on like a little like adventure, and so there would be like pictures and illustrations, and like depending on your choices, it was almost like one of those choose your own adventure books where it's like flip to page 12 if you chose option B. And it was really fun. It was a really good time. After that experience, honestly, there wouldn't be very much design action in terms of interning. The family friend helped me to start to acclimate to digital art. We didn't have the money for like tablets or Photoshop when I wasn't in school. So it was literally MS Paint art. I don't even know if it was MS Paint, whatever the built-in app on Windows was in like the early 2010s. I think it was like a blue square or something with like a paintbrush. That's as close as I could get to the digital art experience. So I had like zero resources. It's not like I had like traditional art supplies either. I would draw on just random paper scraps. Like I remember drawing on like mail, like the envelopes of when you get like your business, your mail or your like bills in the mail. I would draw in like old books from when my aunt was in college, or I would steal loose leaf paper from school. Like literally whatever I could draw on, I would. So when I wasn't like physically in elementary school, high school during the day and had access to art supplies, I would just doodle on literally whatever, you know, like even if it was like a post-it note, fine. And then the family friend, when he had like old art supplies that he didn't really need, he would give it to me, which was really nice. A lot of it was really old. It was from like the 80s and it was, you know, pretty beat up. But like beggars can't be choosers. Beggars can't be choosers. And we just like, we had no money. So it is what it is. Speaking of Photoshop, really quickly, from a mangaka perspective, these were the peak Photoshop years. It was encouraged in like every single book that I read to use very basic Photoshop tools. So lassos, bending PNGs for texture and fabrics. You know, it was a new frontier. This is before the introduction of everybody and their mother owning a bamboo tablet, because the bamboo tablets had like a moment. At least they did here. I don't know about everywhere else, but where I grew up, they did. It was like the thing to, oh my God, the bamboo tablet. Digital art, at the very least in the community, like that I grew up in, but the forums also that I stalked online, it was really seen as like a rich person's super privilege as opposed to something that was readily available, because like things were expensive and things were just not readily available. Like now people finger paint on their phones and they'll call that art, and it is art. But the point is that you have a plethora of all these different means of creating. Like there's all of these apps, and things like Ibis Paint are free. You know, Procreate is $12. When I bought it, it was $12. So one-time payment. I was like, yeah, absolutely. So we grew up just having like paper, pencil, and if you were super uber lucky and your parents had the money, maybe you could score like a Copic marker or two for Christmas. But again, that's reserved for like the ultra, you know, well-off kids. Like it was very rare. I don't think I saw a Copic marker until I was in college, you know? So, in the 2010s, graduated high school. So I'm 17 at this point. And I knew I wanted to study art, but I didn't really feel ready to go to college. And this is a whole conversation in and of itself. But like I was pressured by my family to enroll when I just knew that I was not going to be able to perform, like for a plethora of reasons, mostly because I had just got done with a bout of being a homeless teenager, and it was like mid-custody battle, and I was coming off of like DV, like being in a house of where DV was like it was just really bad, and I was like I can't do this, like I can't do this. But my parents were like, no, you have to. And so my genius scheme was literally the night, like the applications closed at like midnight, I chose my program at like 11 like 50 p.m. of the night of the cutoff, you know. I chose the hardest possible program to get into because my logic was like, oh, it'll be an immediate rejection, and then I don't have to like go to college, but I can make it look like I tried. So I threw together a portfolio, and I was like, there's no way that they're going to let me go to a $4,000 a semester college with a competitive wait list that, no joke, that wait list People had been on it since the 1970s. One of my teachers, my engineering drafting teacher, who was a lovely man, by the way, shout out that guy, had told me that he was teaching at the college and he was still on the wait list. He's like, yeah, I put myself on the wait list in the 70s. They never let me in. And I was like, why am I here? And so I was wrong. They let me in immediately. And I had to pay for my own education. So as you can imagine, that was really fun and cool. At the time, the program for I&D was advertised as any other arts program, except with the guarantee of a job. So you work 3 years and then you have a work permit. And then when you graduate, you can skip needing a master's to be employed. I live in a very stupid part of Canada. That seems like a good adjective for where I live. They're very silly and nonsensical. And like everything is so over-regulated because they want to squeeze as much money as they can out of you. It's very difficult to get a job because everything is like, yeah, you need to have like a PhD and $15,000 and 4 years of school, because if not, you can't even like flip burger. Like, it's ridiculous. So the appeal of this program is like, hey, in 3 years, you can get a job. So cool, whatever. The permit thing was not a lie, but the contents of the program, in my opinion, were a total lie. Like, they were not honest with us at all. In art school here, there's 2 branches. There's I&D, which is a technical skill, and there's fine arts, which is the stereotypical idea of like art school where you like paint what you feel. The college I went to didn't emphasize the difference between the 2 programs. There was actually a third, like, secret program that they just don't advertise in engineering, which was a mix of design, engineering, and graphic design. But they were not part of the art faculty. They were in the engineering faculty. But they like onboarded us. What is that called? Like orientated us on the first day of college with that. It was very strange. This was not even mentioned to me as an option in high school when I was like researching the different types of art degrees. So ridiculous. Like, they made the technical degree sound like it was like the fine arts degree where you just go in and you like paint with all the colors of the wind. That is not what that was at all. So let's get into that like nightmare and a half. Oh, and before we get into that nightmare and a half, really quick trigger warning. There was some devious PDF file activities going on at my college, which I want to talk about because it wasn't just that college, it was a lot of art schools at the time. So if you're sensitive to that, this next part may not be for you. And we're going to talk about a little bit about like bullying by your peers. So if you don't want to hear about that, I completely understand. I'll put timestamps somewhere over here so that you can avoid the things that like you're wanting to avoid, you know? So there you go. Okay, so as I said, contents of I&D. They were different from the fine arts degree in that we had a specific focus on the industry. So some of the courses that made up our course load, which were really strictly scored, and they were pretty much unique to our department, were marketing, engineering, drafting, product design, and this is going to be a really funny way of wording what I want to say, but reproduction, pretend I'm doing air quotes, reproduction, was a big theme. So the goal in I&D is literally to take the last 30 years of design and learn to replicate it. So that's what we mean by like reproduction. You're expected to have the skills you need, like already going into the degree, which nobody told me about, in Photoshop, Bamboo, and any kind of technical skills. So I remember you had to do a drawing exam with your portfolio for them to let you in. And there was a questionnaire that was just like, hey, are you familiar with this, ranging from Photoshop to whatever. And you could score yourself on like, oh, I'm totally proficient, kind of proficient, not very proficient. This isn't necessarily like a deciding factor. Most of the time they're genuinely asking you. I think they should have said like, hey, if you want to come in here, you should know exactly what you're doing, because in the animation program you had to already have prove that you were working in animation in order to go to school to learn to do animation. And so they would ask you and they would test you on all the different software that the college used because you had to already be an animator, which is so ridiculous. Why am I coming and paying you 15 grand over 4 years to teach me something that I'm supposed to know? But whatever. So, long story short, in the industry, right, you got to go in knowing how to do everything, but you also have to enter school knowing how to do everything. So you wouldn't be really learning anything in the program except for the nuanced skill of copying. That's a non-technical way to put it, but it's the truth. So in the industry, right, like you can't always do what you want. If you're going to go work for a show or you're going to go work for a designer, you have to be able to chameleon into their studio. So if you work on SpongeBob, you can't just do whatever you want, right? The characters have to look like SpongeBob. Like, they have to look like what we're used to. So the program that I was in harnessed that on a bigger scale. It was learn what makes the industry tick, and then you go become a design monkey. What I hated about it is that's not what was advertised. They forced us to go to career fairs as a teen. And let me tell you, like, there's maybe 3 colleges here. Like, it's not like I'm choosing between like 28 different art programs. But for some reason they do a bad job of disclosure. They made a point to mention the similarities between I&D and fine arts, and the only difference that I was personally made aware of in these presentations was the work permit. So, long story short, whether we're in drawing class, illustration class, or painting class, the goal is you would be shown something, and then for the number of people that were in the class, by the end of the allotted number of weeks, you had to have that number of the exact same drawing. So if you're 15 people and you're shown a painting, by the end of however many weeks you're given, you should have 15 of the same painting. So when we studied architecture, you would be shown paintings of a certain time period. I distinctly remember doing brutalism for some reason. That was the style. And then the goal was like you have 3 weeks to make 15, like each one of you of the 15 people or however many people had to do exactly the same thing. It doesn't sound unreasonable, like in theory, but you have to remember that no matter what you were doing in all of your classes, your only job was reproduction. And I'm talking I had a 12 course load. All of those courses would just show you things and be like, just redo this. And if you didn't get it like bang on, you would be brutally failed because there's no room for artistic interpretation. It's the same thing with Photoshop. We had a class that was just on Photoshop, and I remember being in tears because I was 17 in college. I had never worked extensively with Photoshop before, and lo and behold, we all sat down and they wanted us to do this like really detailed reproduction of something, and all I remember was that it had to be like to scale, and it had to be like in space, and it had to like show the earth, and it had to be like proportional, and you had to, I think it was like a stack of pancakes, you had to make a stack of pancakes from like the earth into space, and like you could choose how you wanted to show it, but like it had to be like convincing, like we're faking the moon landing style. Obviously I didn't know all the Photoshop functions, and then when I asked the teacher to explain it to me, because we had design labs where you could go in like after hours or on weekends, whatever, I distinctly remember her saying that teaching me wasn't her job, and it's like, okay, well, my bad, bro. Engineering drafting is exactly what it sounded like. It was engineering drafting. Thank God my boyfriend at that time was an engineer. I used to go to his college and get him to do my homework because I had no point of reference for anything, especially the math. Like, I did not take advanced, like, STEM in high school, and so I was like, I don't know what this is. The teacher was cool, though. He's like the only one who didn't antagonize us on purpose, so shout out him. We were a really small class, especially towards the end. We were divided into 2 groups, which in the college I was in is like unheard of, and we averaged about like 10 people or less per course. There were days where there were maybe like 5-6 of us. The dropout rate was really high due to frustration. It was like a weird point of pride among the staff that like nobody makes it to the end of this program. Okay, bro, whatever. It wasn't a stretch, I think, to ask the teachers to do some more teaching, considering there's only like 6 of us on a good day, but whatever. In the design lab, sometimes it would just be me. Like, I would be lucky to spot like another person, you know, in the dead of night or on a fucking Saturday. Sorry. On a Saturday. So that's the gist. There's not really much to say. It was a technical degree, which again, fine for some people. Not what I wanted. I wish it had been advertised clearer. I think if you're not creatively driven and you like the technical application of math and the arts, and you don't mind like not being able to do your projects and becoming somebody's chameleon, then like, yeah, go for it. The thing that I will absolutely not abide by, though, is the way that we were treated in this program. And I know that it's not the norm for the entire college, because I went on to get 3 degrees at that college. And even though there were instances of like weird happenings, but conversation for another day, there was not the like straight up abuse that was going on in that program. So girdle your loins, because we're going to talk about that now. Okay, so this is still a college, which means there's obviously a social component. And I don't even know how to ease into this, so let's just talk about it. Artists are cliquey by nature. We're all insane. We know. We are online. We've seen it. People love to rally together and shit on each other. People like to accuse people of being frauds. People like to just say words and be mean. It's just something that people like to do. We bully kids off the internet. We run each other off social media. Artists love nothing more than antagonizing each other. And I so distinctly remember the it crowd of artists in my program, because they happened to rally around one specific kid. And they were like the only other person who was my age. So we're both fresh out of high school. Hi, we're 17. Here we are. Minors, might I add, but whatever. And to their credit, like, they were indeed very talented. The thing is, though, they were also a huge dick, and all of their friends got off to bullying people. And when I say people, I mean anybody that they came into contact with. Like, it didn't matter who it was, just pick anybody. You'd ask them a question, or you'd like say hello. They'd pretend that they didn't hear you or they didn't see you. We would literally be sitting next to each other, like shoulders touching. It's not like these studios were like huge, gigantic studios, you know. And they'd just pretend that like you weren't there. They'd shit on your work. They'd egg people on when there was negative critique given. There was a weird amount of slut shaming too. We'll get to that, but that was the most mysterious thing to me. Like, to this day, I cannot understand what that was about. Basically, anybody who didn't come to the studio in sweatpants were given the scarlet letter. It's like, okay, sorry for wearing jeans. Like, I didn't know you were the grand poobah. That's a joke for people who are like 40 years old and up. Oh my god. Anyway, so picture the most petty high school baby drama, but being perpetuated by people with several children and a mortgage. Like, has your frontal lobe not developed? And like, I guess because I was a teenager, they were like, oh, this is easy pickings. Because the only other young people were like already in their 20s. Most of our program was populated by people who had had separate careers. But they, again, like, this wait list went on forever. And so when their number came up, they were like, oh my god, at last. But like, a lot of the people that were there with me, there was, I remember distinctly, a geologist. She was like, she had a whole family and a mortgage. There was a geologist. There was a school teacher. There were people that were like 30s, 40s. Crazy. So socially, everything sucked. I did have one friend, and he was cool. And I think us being Latino and queer meant that we kind of had a silent pact to like band together. Apart from the genuinely toxic atmosphere of students, the professors sucked, bro. 3 of them stick out in my mind for the most heinous reasons, and we're gonna call them Mr. Illustration, Mr. Still Life, and Mr. Painting, because that's what they taught. Illustration, still life. I don't remember what his course was called. It was like the fundamentals of something. Technical drawing, but not technical like math. Technical, like, it was a lot of painting naked people, whatever. And the other guy was literally just painting. One day, so we'll start with Mr. Illustration. One day, Mr. Illustration goes on it's day 1, by the way, like the first day of class, goes on this long tangent about how women don't belong in the illustration industry, and how he likes to like be harsher on women and take things out on women in the program because he doesn't think that they're like suited to be artists, which what a foot to start on. Hi, it's me. Have I mentioned I'm a misogynist? Like, I taught professionally for 4+ years. I don't even think you're legally allowed to say that in a classroom. This guy's a freak, okay? Speaking of being a design monkey, IND had a particular emphasis on pace because, again, industry. And what they mean by this is that they burn you out before you can even graduate. They give you insane tasks on nonsensical time crunches. And again, if you're taking like, oh, I take 3 courses a semester, I'm taking 12. So when the hell do I have time to do this bullshit? And like, I have 3 college degrees. I understand that a workload in college is a lot. There's a lot to pack into a semester. You want your students to be prepared for their field they're going into. But at the same time, I don't understand how you could give somebody 12 courses a day from 7:45 a.m. to 8 p.m. plus extra, like, we'll call them overtime hours, nights and weekends, and expect them to come in on, like, these weekends and nights to grind away without either knocking something loose in their brain or having them deliver shitty work, because you can't keep that pace forever, right? That's just me. And again, 4+ years of professional teaching experience. I would never like foist that on not even an adult student. What do I know? So bro wanted us to produce like 30 detailed sketches a week of various still lifes and poses, and he had a specific, like extremely specific repertoire of what he wanted, and he judged the work purely subjectively. And like, I get it, okay, it's art, but you would assume, given that this is a technical illustration course, that there's like some kind of a rubric. So he would give a really vague definition of what he wanted. Direct quote, by the way, because I still have some of my notes from his class and I wrote this quote down. Make the poses dynamic, but not too dynamic. And then he'd just disappear into the what does that mean? And so like, we used to clown on him constantly because nobody ever knew what he wanted. It was basically like, draw your best guess of what you think this guy is talking about. But then the problem is that like, once he had singled out his favorites, again, there's maybe like 6 of us in this class, but bro's got, you know, his favorite like 2 or 3, he would just give people random grades. And so one week you would get like a 98, unheard of, and then the next week you would fail, and then the next week you get an 80, and then the next week you get a 60, and like the crazy, unless you were a dude. And the crazy thing is, he wasn't even the only male teacher with a known reputation for grading men higher than women. Like, okay, girl. So you just had to accept that part of your grades were completely up to chance. Could succeed, could fail, God only knows. Before we move on to his bestie, who was Mr. Still Life, I want to say that this guy was the nail in the coffin of me leaving this degree. I made it to the last year, and then I bailed because I was having a nervous breakdown. I literally thought I was going to die every time I stepped foot onto the campus, to the point that when I went and do my other 3 degrees, the first year, I missed several like tests and things because I could not enter the building because I was so anxious. I would have to like leave halfway through a lecture, and I would have to like go outside and sit down for 10 minutes and then re-enter the building. Like, they fried my brain. The nail in the coffin was, I distinctly remember all of a sudden he started refusing to grade my homework. Like, we would hand in our sketchbooks at the end of the week with the proof that we had been doing all of these things that he wanted us to do, and he just like refused to take mine, and then he failed me. So I went to the department chair people. There I am, I'm 17, I'm bawling my eyes out, okay? This guy is basically like, he had yelled at me in front of everybody and made up some weird excuse about like, I don't want your, what was it? He's like, I don't want you to like be nice to me, because I was like, well, maybe like I did something to piss him off. I was like, let me try being like really nice to him. And he's like, I don't want you to be nice to me. I want you to like draw better. And I was like, well, you won't grade my work. So like, if you won't give me feedback, what do you want me to draw? And so I'm alone. I'm a child. I'm at college. I've been here at this point, like at the point that this story is happening. It has not been that long, right? And because IND was so strict about what constituted grounds to kick you out, literally over one failing grade, I was like, I'm gonna get the chop. Luckily, there was some older woman who seemed like she was in her I mean, she seemed to have her shit together, so I guess I just assumed she was in her final year. She found me like sobbing in my hallway in a corner, and she was like, what the hell's going on? And I told her, and she was like, oh my god, again with this guy. She's like, yeah, we get girls in here like every week. You're not the first, you're not the last. I spoke to the chair people, and they basically were like, yeah, like, we know he's a menace and we know he's a misogynist, and he's deeply sexist, but we can't do anything about it. They're like, if you want to leave your sketchbook with us, like, we'll force him to grade it so that at least we know that he's being fair. And that's what I did. Later that semester, I spoke to another one of our female professors, and she just straight up was like, yeah, Mr. Illustration and Mr. Still Life are dicks. Not just to the female students, they're like, but they're mean to us too. She had done a solo exhibition, which I went and see, and it was I'm not usually like a modern art enjoyer or like a performance art enjoyer, but I liked her. Like, she had a fun personality. She had done this like project on like spatial and textural properties of draping fabric in all these different ways, and apparently Mr. Illustration like hadn't even gone to the show, but was like telling people a freak. His bestie, Mr. Still Life, also had favoritism problems, but his main thing was he was a PDF file. Now, I want to say I've never been to an institution which is art focused and not encountered, for some reason, a hotbed of PDFs. My tinfoil hat conspiracy theory is that predators genuinely think that liberal arts parents are not watching their kids close enough, and so they think that they can like get away with more. At my elementary and high school, it was the same school, there were 2 notable predators who were arrested, and like 3 that till today are still at large. And I actually, as a teacher, when I became a teacher, not there, but I complained directly to our school board for our district about one of them who I knew was a PDF file because he had tried his weird PDF shit on me from the ages of like 9 to 16, and they were like, can't do anything about it, chief. And I was like, okay, cool. So that's my tinfoil hat conspiracy. I'm sure that like other institutions, anywhere with kids, is a potential breeding ground for like heinous activities. But I'm 2 for 2 on art institutes sheltering predators, which is not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. So Mr. Still Life, a dick. He only graded his faves fairly, and his faves were exclusively people who kissed his ass. On the first day of having met him, he told me I had no talent because I drew a cylinder and he didn't like it, which, like, okay, amazing. At the time, I found it so absurd. It became an in-joke to me and my one friend. The other inside joke, which to this day remains hilarious, is that I cussed him out in Spanish, which only me and the other Latino in the room could understand. And bro turned around and said, I love the Spanish language. It's so romantic. And it was the funniest, like, oh, reparations were made that day. Okay, Mr. Still Life's issues with me specifically began when we all noticed that he's weirdly touchy-feely, but only with the female nude models. So his course was you would go in and you would have naked models. I think it was like every Monday or whatever for like 4 hours. And you'd look at butts, boobs and butts, and you'd draw them. Hooray! With the men, he was like cut and dry, which, by the way, is how you should be. Like, the nude models are there to do you a favor so you can learn anatomy. They're not there for you to, like, ogle, you freak. For some reason, though, whenever he had women models, they were like maybe 20, thin, conventionally attractive, white. He would like touch them to highlight the body parts. He would say things about like accentuating the butt. He would like touch their backs and like he would feel them up. It was so weird to the point that even the students who kissed his ass were like, yeah, this guy is putting out vibes. What was even worse, though, we would later find out, I think in our second year, that he had a penchant for dating fresh out of high school college students. These were 17-year-olds. And everybody knew, because he could not physically stop himself from bragging about how his latest girlfriends were like 17, 18, and like Okay, you want to be 54 and date an 18-year-old? I'm not jazzed about it, but like, it's legal. But like, you met her when she was 17. Right? The last update I got in terms of both of these evil men was that they were forced to retire early by the college. So Mr. Illustration had too many complaints against him. Mr. Still Life apparently had taken to very loudly announcing to everybody that he was intercoursing teens. This was way after I left the program that all of this unfolded, but I heard, through the grapevine of the people that ended up graduating. The college didn't fire them. They didn't release them without pay. They didn't put them on like investigative. I taught for 4.5 years. Can't speak English. They didn't investigate them and put them on leave. They literally just were like, hey, retire early and cash in your 401k, which, oh my God. But am I surprised? No. This is also the college that went to war with the student body, by the way, because they wanted to show black people being hinged, let us say, if you catch my drift, for Black History Month. Oh my God. And then when the students were like, hey, what? No. They were like, well, the faculty pitched a hissy fit, and they were like, black people don't know how to protest properly. So again, not super shocked. Like, in case you need to be told, no institution is your friend ever, including educational institutions. Like, they could be full of the kindest, brightest, most motivated people, but as an institution, they are not operating with your best interest in mind, least of all if you are paying them to be there. Okay. So, predator number 3, who did actually retire of his own volition, I guess. I think he saw the writing on the wall and he was like, let me get up out of here, is Mr. Painting. Mr. Painting was just a jealous nutcase. He was an equal opportunity hater. He was jealous of men who painted as good as him or better than him, which is hilarious because we're all meant to be reproducing exactly the same thing. So like, why are you mad if it's as good as yours? That's kind of your job. And in terms of women, he really just hated the ones who like didn't flirt with him. He had a distinctly misogynistic view that women with social lives were all whores, which is insane. So if you spoke to like a dude in the class, you were a Jezebel. If you wore jeans, you were out. If you looked in the general direction of a man that was not this guy, you were like worthy of the scarlet letter. He hated me specifically because I refused to flirt with him and because my bestie was a man in the program. So we used to talk to each other, me and the bestie, all that, because like I'm painting for 5 hours straight. What the hell else is there to do? I'm gonna yap. And one time Mr. Painting loudly comes up to me and he's like, I think women who talk a lot are whores. And it's like, okay. And then he just like sauntered away like in front of everybody. And because I've always been a stubborn pain in the ass, I literally just I went right on talking. And I think that cemented my doom, because then every time we had a public art critique, he'd like shit on me the hardest. So, I wasn't exactly playing nicely with these like outwardly antagonistic men, but at the same time, I didn't care because I already realized that I was not going to stay in this degree and they already had my money. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to write it out and give you shit right back. Fuck it. Like, I'm paying you to be here. I'm going to shit on you right back. The chair people of that program had been newly appointed and they were women, and I have no way of confirming this, but I was told that it was in an effort to offset some of this like nonsense that was happening in the program, but they had no intention of protecting the women in their program from predators. So I was like, I'm just going to be mean. Like, if you're not going to protect me, I'm going to protect myself by being mean. To this day though, engineering drafting teacher, loveliest guy ever. Like, amazing. Not a creep, not a misogynist, genuinely really supportive of his students. He won an award at one point for outstanding teaching, which was very well deserved. I still remember his name out of love as opposed to spite. But yeah. Hilariously though, Mr. Still Life and company did not like him and constantly shit-talked him to us. So I wonder why. Misery loves company. So what happened next? Well, I left. I did a semester of night school, and I realized that the art industry was just not for me. I applied to a general social science and a fine arts degree, like the just, paint what you feel degree. I got accepted to both, but I decided the stress of being in the arts faculty was not for me. And so I was in social science instead. And that's it. I did 3 degrees at that college. I taught K through 12 and certain college courses for 4.5 years. I had a successful internship in medical office management, and it helped me like to go from the college that I chose under duress into my dream university, and that was really nice. So there's a lot to be said about that as well. But the gist is I didn't really use my illustration and design skills until very recently, like in 2024, when I rejoined the design field. Okay, so I can't really speak for every facet of the like illustration and design field, because hilariously I'm still kind of in it. Illustration especially can take on many different forms because everybody needs graphic designers, from funeral homes to freelance positions to basically every industry. Like art has a place everywhere it could possibly be employed. And if we're speaking in terms of pure design, which we are going to, because I recently left a company which dealt in designing furniture. So on the plus side, it seems that streamlined design jobs are finally adhering to regulations, which is nice. So we've got health insurance and livable-esque wages, which we love. Remote jobs obviously have taken flight post-COVID, so freelancers are not shunned in the land of desk job workers. And it's becoming a lot easier to maintain an artistic side hustle while working a desk job. So, win for supporting your dreams. Pitfalls. Overworking. Overpromising to clients. Giving little regard to the wellness of their employees. I think it's worse for artists because we are somehow still not taken seriously. So, the basket weaving, coloring book degrees, but all the work that goes into it. It's not really a coloring book degree, is it? If you're spending 15 grand in 4 years to practically die on the altar of art. I think the harshness of the college atmosphere is very much mirrored in the work atmosphere, in that in many sectors, the atmosphere and the scheduling and the ambiance remains brutal. And it's not very fun. And now we have AI to worry about. It's no surprise, okay? Robot overlords taking our jobs. AI has great potential as a tool. It removes the grunt work from day-to-day processes. But of course, a handful of billionaires have decided to steal from human artists and turn a profit. Yay! At my job, we were encouraged to use AI a lot. I thought it was very silly to use AI, for everything that they wanted us to use it for. It was a lot of soft skills, writing emails, customers, to staff. But if you can't communicate in a comprehensive way with each other, I have bad news. The issue is not the need for AI. The issue is that you don't know how to draft an email in the English language. What are we doing? ChatGPT was being pushed on us a lot, along with a handful of other AI plugins. There were so many. Oh my god. But again, I found it counterintuitive and nonsensical. But there was one benefit to using ChatGPT for grunt work. So for example, in marketing, when you write a brief, your brief could include a contract that could go for upwards of 19 pages. You don't necessarily want to spend 20 hours drafting a contract and then turn around and spend another 20 hours getting those 19 pages down to 2. There's just not that many hours in a week. So ChatGPT is great for condensing work. It's a nifty search engine. If you need to narrow down a list of things, of searches, or you want to scan through social media for trend predictions, they're very daunting tasks. Arguably, it's kind of impossible to scan through all of Instagram, you know what I mean? And so when you're on hour 40 of a 50-something hour work week, yeah, give the stupid task to the robot. And then I'll use my human brain to pick through the information and write down what I think constitutes the best plan of action. Specifically when we would look for marketing collaborations with influencers. I don't know what every influencer on this goddamn platform does. And so having ChatGPT and being this is the vibe I'm looking for. Give me 10 names. And then okay, I'll look at these 10 people. And then it's wrong. This is wrong. That's wrong. Give me whatever, 5 more. Or give me 3 less. Or can you give me a summary of this person's page? Because realistically, do I have time to look through 15,000 of your photos? No. I gotta do this for you, and then 4 other people, I got 40 hours to do it. I just can't all be done. So, there you go. I don't really
like have big opinions on AI. Other than, grunt work made easy, theft bad. But I am working on a video about it. So specifically, I've made a custom GPT and I'm feeding it my own art to see what it can come up with. I'm creating a Frankenstein's monster. But I think that curiosity in the face of a new innovation is good. Experiments produce interesting data, and then you can judge for yourself how you feel about something. Otherwise, the job hunt in design was punctuated by poisonous garbage. The downside to AI is that there's a lot of companies who are very sneaky in their recruiting, so they'll ask you to do concept art or character design, and then they'll use your art to train their AI models to eventually take your job. It's gross. It's like training your own murderer on how to effectively get rid of you and then hide the evidence. I almost got sucked into a contract like this before, and then I found out what the company was actually up to the day before, and I was like, no. The other thing I'm noticing, mistreatment of employees, man. Okay, it's already a tough enough gig for artists out there, and there's already the prejudice of, it's a coloring book degree, without industry exploitation, but the working conditions continue in design to overpromise to clients and lead to burnout and rage among its employee base. I left the company that I was at because I was tired of them treating burnout like a joke. They would basically come after anybody who was stressed or having a hard day. They would lie to clients to keep them engaged. They would overpromise on deliverables, knowing the company couldn't make that deadline work by any means. The blame was then foisted on us for not working hard enough, which abhorrent, honestly. I personally refuse to lie to customers, especially when we were encouraged to greenwash or lie about production, lie about the components of the furniture, seem more eco-friendly to get sales. I'm not into that. I think that the way that they treated influencers was absolutely ridiculous as well. My job wasn't in sales. But when a company takes to straight up lying about a manufacturing process to make a buck, whether I'm selling the thing, designing the thing, optimizing the thing, or marketing the thing, I'm out. So my experience re-entering the field of design, not great. But now that I'm experiencing design as a freelancer in the context of being an apprentice again, that sentence was so hard to say. I'm an apprentice again. So far, I'm pretty happy. I don't have any outstanding criticisms right now, but it's still pretty early as an apprentice, so things may change. I'm a mortician apprentice. What a career change. But we use graphic design, all that. We actually have it's really cool. We have a design lab in the basement of my job. Because again, design has its place absolutely everywhere. So I'm really curious to see what will become of the mortuary industry and design, but so far it's been great, so no negative feedback there. Okay, so final thoughts. What did we learn? Number 1, don't feel pressured as a teen to decide the trajectory of your entire life. Nobody knows at 17 where you're gonna end up, okay? Take your time, do your research, and even then, be prepared for the outcome of your life to turn out different than whatever you had planned. Number 2, all you need to produce good art is a pencil and a scrap of paper. And now that we have the internet, there's so many tutorials and so much information readily available to you for free. You don't really need to invest in your art career to start. Pick up anything and just do it. Which brings us to number 3. You learn a lot more from observing artists in the wild than you do from getting a formal education. If you want to go to college and become an artist, guess what? Okay, college expects you to arrive already having been an artist. That's why you bring in a portfolio. So see what people are up to outside of institutions. Follow your favorite artists. Google things that interest you. Pay for a course on Course 101, bro. Sign up for a Patreon. Sign up for my Patreon. For free, where I yap about how to use bases and achieve character sheets. Just keep going in the direction of things that make you happy. You have to have a hunger for learning. Don't expect that you're gonna set foot in college and magically become a better artist. They're there to nudge you and sort of guide you in the right direction. They're not really there to teach you, in my experience. Okay, disclaimer. But the long and the short of it is, like my terrible experience can't tell the future for you. In this ever-changing world that values productivity and money over like artistic integrity, brace yourself for the climate of reproduction, overworking, discrimination to become considerably worse as time wears on and tech advances and billionaires become convinced that they don't need people to work for them anymore. Like, we've gone from having very little avenues as artists to a plethora of jobs and degrees that you can work towards, but the overall attitude of the industry has changed very little. And so it's kind of just been like steeping in uncertainty and abuse. And everywhere you look, right? Like animators, designers, illustrators, creatives, they're being pushed out of work either by AI or just by instability. They're being pushed into a gig economy. A lot of us are abandoning our aspirations in favor of being self-employed. I still ran Spasadic Studio even when I was teaching. I've been on the internet since God only knows when. Jesus. Like, you know? With the advent of social media taking over our lives, like, it's not a viable career path. Like, assuming you have some kind of a stable nest egg or a day job to keep you afloat, like, you can keep making things that you like. You don't have to go slave away for a corporation and be like, well, I have to have a portfolio to be a real artist. Like, who cares? First of all, who cares? Second of all, on social media, who's checking? Who's like, well, they have 105k followers, but they don't have a portfolio. No one cares. What are they going to ask you for your LinkedIn on Twitter? No, bro. No one cares. I worry a lot about young people, especially wannabe artists, because the net is becoming a poisonous cesspool that has begun to normalize institutional problems. And like, these problems were once thought of as dramatic retellings of like one-off events, you know, like the movie Whiplash isn't a documentary, but it is. Like, just be nice to each other and do whatever the hell you want. There's no such thing as like, you're a real artist, you're not a real artist. No one uses their degrees for anything anyway. Do you think I'm using my 3 degrees? Bro, no, I am not. Do you know how many people are out there with big girl jobs? I'm talking marketing, education, HR, like sales, and they do not have it. They have a GED. Like, doesn't matter. I know we're conditioned to think that it matters. It's just a piece of paper. The stupidest person you know may have a PhD. That PhD does not make them an idiot. It just means that they're good at school. Like, it just means that they're good at following institutional rules, which is in and of itself a skill. But like, it doesn't mean anything. Did I not gain any kind of skills in school? I can't say that, because theory is forever. When you deal in anatomy and you do color theory and you retain valuable skills, like, you can put them to work at any point in your career. Marketing, you can use always. You know, like, example, we used to have courses where we sat on the floor in the college and we just did perspective for hours. Like, you would just move around and you would have to imagine various objects in space. Helps a ton. Live nude models, super helpful. Engineering drafting, oddly enough, being able to do a 1-to-1 reproduction of an image using math. It's not a skill that you can't use. Like, I think if protections for students had been in place and the predatory men at large had been disciplined properly, I would have stayed in my program. But to this day, how long has it been? 10 years later, I still hear the same types of horror stories of what's going on, and it's disappointing. Like, the youth deserve better, aspiring artists deserve better, and established artists in the industry deserve better. Unionize! Okay, it's time for the AMA. So these are user-submitted questions on Instagram. You can join me there at Spasadic Studios with an S Creations to see all my wacky misadventures, and you can yell at me about the fact that my name is pronounced Spasadic. So question 1, is it worth going to college as opposed to self-teaching? Depends on your vision for the future. If you don't mind the pace and you don't mind the grunt work, go for it. But know that there's nothing art school can teach you that you cannot at this very moment Google for yourself. And if you think you're going to go to art school and you're going to magically become a better artist, or there's a secret skill that you're going to learn, you're mistaken. The internet gives you access to an amount of information like I could only ever dream of as a kid. There was an emphasis on going to school for me because work from home, remote positions, freelancing, and like the general breadth of what was available online was either severely limited or non-existent. So, what's your least favorite thing about the design industry? It's the clickiness. Okay, in modern times, I guess I would say the evil robots lining up to take our jobs, but like we see online all the time how easy it is to bully people, especially young people, out of the artistic space over very little. I think we're becoming judgier because the internet makes money off of telling us what to think is a hot and good take, and people are afraid that if they don't follow in the exact footsteps, they'll be shunned. And so the fear of being shunned creates even more of a precedence to be shunned. But the problem is that sometimes the things that we decide as a community are a hot take are not a hot take. Opinions are subject to change. It might be cool to do, oh my god, art lore and bully kids off the internet today, but fast forward 6 months later and everyone comes to their senses. But those kids who have stopped creating, they probably don't want to come back. You've ruined somebody's career because you just wanted to be shitty. So the industry has a lot of problems, duh. But for me personally, I've always found that the favoritism and the cult-like corners of artistic spaces are the biggest turnoff. Next question. How do you keep up the motivation to create for others? I think this one is just personality. In my case, I became very good at forcing myself to hunker down and do things while I was doing my degrees. Unfortunately, part of any job, right, is you got to do things you don't particularly love. Like, you clock in, you make it happen. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy doing things like commissions or paid work. The paycheck is a nice incentive, but making people happy is why I do it. I think you have to strike the happy medium of self-discipline and finding meaning in the tasks that you're doing. And I believe that when it comes to jobs, like, there's no job too small. We need people to work at McDonald's. We need people to be brain surgeons. Every type of labor contributes to the world going around. So thank the universe, even when you have shitty grunt work to do, that you have work to do at all, because there are people queuing up en masse, praying to have the same opportunities as you. Do you think the online art market is saturated? It is and it isn't. I think that every creative person has a little something that nobody can replicate. And if you allow yourself to go in the direction of your artistic joy, then you can create things that nobody has ever seen before. You need to believe in yourself. You need to trust in the journey. You'll never end up doing exactly what you started off doing, like in any business venture or any hobby, because evolution is part of the plan. That evolution is predetermined before you even start. But if you spend all your time worrying about if it's permissible for you to start off in a market where other people are also creative, you'll never get off the ground. So, short answer, the market online, it's always going to be saturated. But if you're making art because it brings you joy, you should not care. Any tips for prospective freelancers? Take a course in basic marketing, oh my god. Start small, start with one social media platform and study it. Look at trends, look at predictions, fire up the old GPT and see what the hell is slated to be going on for the next 6 months, 9 months to a year. You're going to have to do some doom scrolling to see what's doing well, and you have to understand your audience. Look at your analytics, see what's on top of the For You page, timeline dashboard, the Pingle board, whatever board your app uses. Just pay attention to what gets attention. Create a brand, get comfortable with your aesthetic, lean into your skills and your personal voice. Don't try to sell people what you think they want to buy. Just sell what you're selling, and your audience will find you. Hone the skill of self-discipline, hone the skill of economic planning. Don't blow all your budget on merch. If you're barely scraping by with 10K followers because all you're doing is flushing money down the drain, girl, grow your audience. And I cannot stress this enough, ask them often if they want merch and what merch they want, and go make that. It doesn't have to be all the time for every post where you're asking them, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want to see? But work with them to curate a feed that people feel drawn to. Be authentic, make moots, make friends, be yourself, do you. Your personality is the most valuable asset online. That's all you have, okay? In succeeding in a customer-facing industry, it's all we have. So there you go. Well, friendos, this has been a good time. Here's your gold star for listening to me yap. If you like this video, please do subscribe. I got great controversial hot takes on RE8 mouthwashing and AI coming up. So we can all yell at me together on Twitter for that, and it'll be really fun. Scrungle that bungle and poingle that spoingle, and like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, bye.